What happens when a country star everyone loves walks into what should be a normal morning show spot, only to find himself caught in the middle of a controversy that nobody saw coming? Blake Shelton thought he was just dropping by the Today Show studio for another light-hearted chat with Jenna and the team. But what unfolded would leave the whole studio frozen, and viewers at home unable to look away. The morning began like countless others at the Today Show headquarters in New York City. Blake arrived around 7:30, coffee in hand, his usual laid-back attitude showing as he greeted staff. He was there for a standard promotional segment, set to talk about his latest album and the tour that was about to kick off. Nothing unusual, just one more media stop in the busy schedule of one of country music's most well-known faces. Jenna Bush Hager was already in the studio, flipping through her notes with the producers when Blake stepped inside. She had spoken with him many times before, and the two had easy chemistry that audiences adored. Fans loved seeing Blake's easygoing personality and his quick sense of humor, and Jenna always had a way of drawing that side of him out. Today's plan was supposed to be the same, a cheerful back and forth about music, maybe a few fun stories from The Voice, and of course plugging his new work. But as Blake sat down in the guest chair, shifting his cowboy hat and testing the microphone, he noticed something was different. Jenna looked slightly more tense than usual. Her smile didn't quite meet her eyes as she shuffled her cards again. Across the room, producers whispered to each other, staring at their phones with worried looks. Blake picked up on it right away. Years in the business had trained him to read a room, and this room felt uneasy. Even their normal pre-show banter felt stiff, like they were both pretending not to notice something. "Everything okay, Jenna?" Blake asked in his Oklahoma drawl, leaning back casually. "You look like somebody just told you your dog chewed up your homework." Jenna gave a laugh, though it sounded forced. "Oh, you know how it is, Blake. Just making sure we cover everything today. We've got a lot to talk about." The way she leaned on those last words made Blake tilt his head. He had done more interviews than he could count, and he knew the signs when a host had something more on their mind than small talk. This felt like one of those setups. The stage manager called for quiet, and the cameras lit up. Jenna switched into her on-air smile as she welcomed Blake to the show. For the first few minutes, it was business as usual. Blake cracked a joke about his time on The Voice, teased about his fishing back in Oklahoma, and shared a bit about his music. Everything seemed light, normal, safe. Then Jenna's tone shifted. It was subtle, but Blake caught it. "Blake, I want to ask you about something a little more serious, if that's okay," she said. Blake's grin faded just slightly. "Sure thing, Jenna. Go ahead." "There have been some comments you made in a recent radio interview that people online are buzzing about," Jenna began. "You mentioned the state of country music and some of your fellow artists. Can you explain what you meant when you said some newer performers are, quote, losing touch with what country music really is?" Blake froze for a second, like cold water had been splashed in his face. He had given plenty of radio interviews lately, and while he remembered voicing opinions about the industry, he didn't recall saying anything so harsh. His instincts kicked in, but inside, he was genuinely puzzled. "Well, Jenna, I think maybe some context is missing there," Blake said carefully, his tone guarded. "I love seeing fresh talent come into country and bring their own spin to it. That's what keeps it alive." But Jenna wasn't letting it go. She looked down at her notes, her voice steady. "But you also said some artists focus more on social media than songwriting. You even said, and I'll quote, that some of them wouldn't know real country if it bit them in the behind. Those are strong words, Blake." Blake's jaw tightened. Now he remembered the Nashville interview. It had been casual, off the cuff, where he'd spoken honestly about the commercialization of the genre. He hadn't meant it as a personal attack, but the way Jenna framed it, it sounded like he was pointing fingers. "Hold on there, Jenna," Blake said, his voice carrying a warning edge. "You're taking my words and making them sound harsher than they were." The studio air thickened instantly. Producers behind the cameras exchanged nervous glances. Even camera operators stiffened, sensing the segment was going off script. Jenna, though, pressed forward. "I'm just reading from the transcript. These are your words." And since that aired, several artists have taken it personally online. "How do you respond to that?" Blake's famous temper, usually kept under wraps, began to spark. He leaned forward. I've been in this business over 20 years. I've always supported up-and-coming artists. If somebody takes a general comment about trends and makes it about themselves, that says more about them than me. Jenna's eyes narrowed slightly. But Blake, with your platform, don't you think you should be more careful about how your words are interpreted? You're not just some guy at a bar. You're Blake Shelton. What you say carries weight. The cameras caught the flash in Blake's eyes. The easygoing cowboy was slipping away, replaced by the sharp businessman who had survived the cutthroat music industry for decades. So now you're telling me how I should use my platform? He shot back, his voice rising enough to make the crew sit straighter. I've been using my platform to help careers and lift up artists long before some of these people even thought about picking up a guitar. The exchange had turned into something far more heated than anyone expected. Jenna stayed locked in, driven by pressure or maybe conviction, unwilling to ease off. I'm not telling you what to do, Jenna said. I'm asking if you'll take responsibility for how your words made new artists feel. Blake gave a humorless laugh, the kind that signaled danger to those who knew him. You know what's unfair, Jenna? Having my comments twisted just to create drama. I was talking about the industry overall, not throwing punches at anyone specific. But of course, that doesn't make for exciting TV, does it? Jenna glanced at her cards again. But when artists like Morgan Wade and Parker McCollum feel attacked, how can you say it's not personal? That was the breaking point. Blake's face darkened. He respected those artists, and to hear their names dragged into this was infuriating. Stop right there, he snapped. I never named them. I'd never insult them. Morgan Wade's incredible, and Parker's as authentic as they come. Trying to stir up a feud between me and people I respect is exactly what's wrong with media today. The tension was unbearable. Jenna tried again, but when you say some people wouldn't know real country if it bit them, what else are they supposed to think? They're supposed to use common sense. Blake exploded, his control finally breaking. I was talking about cookie-cutter stuff pushed out by the system with no heart. I wasn't attacking anyone, but I guess nuance doesn't fit with clickbait headlines. The studio was silent except for Blake's voice. The crew watched wide-eyed. Jenna tried to bring calm, but Blake wasn't finished. You talk about responsibility? How about being responsible enough not to twist a conversation for views? How about showing the whole context instead of cherry-picking quotes? Blake, Jenna started. Upset? Blake cut her off, ripping off his microphone. I'm not upset. I'm disappointed. Disappointed that someone I thought was a friend set me up like this. Disappointed that a show I've always enjoyed is more interested in viral drama than real conversations. The mic toss sent shockwaves through the room. Jenna tried to stop him. So you're just leaving? Walking out instead of having a real conversation? Blake stopped, turned slowly, his voice low and sharp. A real conversation would have been you or your team calling mine ahead of time. A real conversation doesn't blindside someone on live TV to make them look like a bully. Jenna's face flushed, but she stood her ground. I'm doing my job, Blake. Tough questions come with it. Your job? Blake laughed bitterly. Your job used to be about honesty and real dialogue. Now it's about stirring up controversy. Well, congrats. You got your moment. The studio felt like it was holding its breath. Blake shook his head. I came here ready to talk about music, to share about incredible artists I'm working with, to announce a charity project. But we wasted that time on fake drama. He turned to leave. And for the record, some of the truest country I've heard in years comes from artists younger than me. But I guess that's not good TV, is it? Jenna called out one last time, but Blake didn't stop. Some things you can't reset. Jenna. And this is one of them. And with that, Blake Shelton walked off, leaving behind one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning TV history. The set dissolved into chaos. Producers rushed in, commercials cut the broadcast, and within minutes, clips were racing across social media. Blake's team fielded calls nonstop. The Today Show scrambled into damage control. But perhaps the most telling moment came not in the studio, but in the lobby. A young assistant, barely older than a college grad, approached Blake nervously. Mr. Shelton, I heard that radio interview. You didn't say anything wrong. I think what just happened was unfair. Blake paused, looking at her with softened eyes. Thanks, sweetheart. That means more than you realize. Remember, in this line of work, context is everything. Don't let anyone twist your words.